Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm pleased to be here. I work in Barcelona. I actually work with Joan Clos, the former mayor of Barcelona and the head of UN Habitat. I also work a little bit with the Global Institute on Innovation Districts. And this episode is about, among many other things, I think we got into some very interesting discussions. This episode is about place-led development, where the bottom-up placemaking meets the top-down development, where the real estate developers and the real estate investors and the cities who are making decisions about what these developers and investors have to do when they do their projects, where their top-down meets our bottom-up placemaking. And so I hope you find the discussion interesting.
Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica Podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRY. AFRY is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it.
Today we have a new story from Placemaking Europe in Pontevedra, and we have a new storyteller. I have the pleasure to welcome you, David, to Urbanistica Podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy week, but also a very exciting week. And it's been nice to see the whole community come together after a few years of not seeing each other. So
Yeah.
It's actually been very nice.
So do you manage to attend your favorite sessions, or?
You know, it's been interesting because I've been one of the organizers this year.
Yeah.
And so, there's some responsibilities that come with that. So I don't get to attend as many sessions as I did in past conferences.
Yeah.
But no, I've attended some very interesting sessions and learned some good things.
Amazing.
So I think the keynotes have all been really interesting, and the breakout sessions have been interesting. And I also managed to moderate one of the sessions, which went very well.
How was it?
It was actually excellent.
Cool.
It was good. We were very pleased.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you tell me more about this. But before we start talk about placemaking and all the topics, let's start with you. You are our storyteller. How would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, I think, I was thinking about this beforehand. I thought I would start a little bit with like the human side of me first, right? Because of course it's easy to jump into like what I do as work, and the placemaking side and all those things. But, I'm originally from New York. I'm an urban planner by background, but originally from New York. But I've been living in Barcelona for the last 8 years, which is a beautiful city. I love, as a New Yorker who's used to this super urban city, having a beach that I can take a 20-minute bus ride to, and having mountains also, about a 30-minute train ride away from. I also have a daughter who's 10 years old, which is, it's a fun age. And, getting into kind of, more maybe professional stuff. I'm an urban planner, like I mentioned. I've worked a lot in parks and public space. I've done a lot of project management of, I kind of have sort of two different careers, because there's kind of a before Barcelona and an after Barcelona. So it's kind of in a way I have a hard time sometimes summarizing it. The before Barcelona, David, was generally project managing large urban projects, large master plans, large park redevelopment projects, and really playing kind of a leadership role, project management role, this sort of thing. And since I've moved to Barcelona, I've had to kind of recalibrate and adapt myself. It's a different market. They look for sort of a different profile for different jobs. So I've had some luck to connect with some really interesting people, including the former mayor of Barcelona, Joan Clos, who's going to be actually speaking tomorrow.
Nice.
And so I've done a lot of interesting work that generally is around economic development. So
what made you move from New York to Barcelona?
my wife is from Barcelona.
Here we go.
There you go. Exactly. But getting back to the human part. But in all honesty, actually, the funny thing is, I always had a connection to Barcelona.
Yeah. Now we.
So it was interesting because I lived in Brazil also for a couple of years, and one day a couple of years ago, I was back in New York, and I was looking through some old papers, and I was reminded because I found some old printouts that I had done. There was a moment where I was deciding, do I go to Rio de Janeiro or to Barcelona?
Oh, what?
And I had printed out some job vacancies that I had seen in Barcelona, and fate took me to Barcelona.
Yeah. That's interesting because so far now I interviewed 350 people.
Wow.
And the people who did this journey, moving from city to another city, I ask why you did that.
Yeah.
Not many of them tell me because of the job. Everyone says, I fall in love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And David, what are you passionate about?
I think, again, I could kind of break it out into the human part and the professional part. So maybe the human part, I'm a very active person, right? So I love sports. I love running. I've always been a runner, a biker, these sort of things, swimmer, which is really nice in Barcelona because you can swim in the sea.
Yeah.
As far as what I'm passionate about professionally, I just have this general. I was thinking about it beforehand. How would I describe it? I have this general sense of sort of a passion for cities that are just well designed.
Yeah.
And it's probably redundant in some ways compared to maybe some of the other people you talk about, but just cities that you walk through. I mean, I think Pontevedra is a perfect example. You walk through and you just feel good, and there's a lot of things that go into that. There's the architecture, there's the public space, there's the fact that there's not many cars here.
The clean air.
I think one of the other things that I'm really passionate about within that general category is bringing nature really into the cities. So I mentioned that I had worked a lot with parks and park redevelopment. So really, Barcelona is, for example, a very urban city. It's lacking a little bit in kind of the sense of, that nature exists.
The greenery,
exactly. And so fortunately, I actually have access to my rooftop. And so I have an urban garden on the rooftop.
That's nice.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
And that, I guess you could also put in the category of one of my passions. But yeah, no, I think we, at least personally, I feel bringing nature into the city is a really important aspect of, for many reasons. There's sustainability reasons too, but just also in terms of really how you experience the city.
Exactly.
So all these things are kind of really my kind of professional passions.
Yeah. And David, what brought you to placemaking world? What was the background?
The background was that I actually had worked with a Project for Public Space on a small project back in New York. And then when I moved to Barcelona, I got in touch with the woman that I had worked with on that project. And she mentioned, hey, the 2017 Amsterdam conference was coming up at that time.
Okay.
And so I was at the original, at least for Europe, the original placemaking conference. And I made a lot of good friends and I listened to just a lot of, since then I've worked with some of the people that so that was my original connection.
Yeah. Interesting. And now you're here in Pontevedra.
Yep.
And you're part of all this.
Yeah.
Tell us about behind the scenes. What happened? What did you do?
Well, the interesting, just to give a little more of a backstory, the way that I actually have a connection with Pontevedra that goes a little beyond placemaking Europe.
Wow.
So I originally, I think I mentioned maybe early on that I met, some interesting people.
Yeah.
One of them being, and I think I mentioned Joan Clos, the former mayor of Barcelona.
Yeah.
So I worked with him for a few years and still work with him. And we actually did a project with Pontevedra. And so we kind of worked with them to understand a little bit, what's the next step in the evolution of Pontevedra?
Yeah.
Kind of they've done all this wonderful stuff. They've won 1 million awards.
What's next?
Exactly. And so, it's funny. We kind of went through the whole study and it became clear that there was something else they wanted. They wanted people to know Pontevedra.
Okay, like the city. Not only about Pontevedra.
Yeah, not just get an award, but they wanted people to come here and experience it and to kind of put it on the map.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, we're looking for a place for Placemaking Europe. So would you be interested?
Yeah.
And everything happened very quickly. Ramon talked to them.
Yeah.
And everything just happened very quickly because Pontevedra was very enthusiastic. And, Pontevedra as a city is a very attractive city to do the conference. So
amazing.
It happened very quickly. What have I been experienced since I've been here? I think I've experienced a lot of different things, a lot of interesting talks, a lot of inspirational, workshops and talks from, the keynotes and everyone else. I've experienced a lot of nice conversations offline, at the bars and cafes.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the special things about Placemaking Europe, Placemaking Week, is that there's the social element, this family element that you find time to kind of sit down and have a coffee or a beer with someone. With a lot of people,
exactly.
And so that's been a big part of it as well.
Are you happy now? Like we are on the third day.
Yeah. It goes a little too fast, because now we're kind of, there's still tomorrow, but like the two big days, I guess, are Wednesday and Thursday. Yeah. So it kind of feels like, we're already getting to the
days.
End. Yeah, we have.
But like, I have a question. Why you don't make it as a week, like an entire week?
It's a good question, especially since we have so many sessions.
Yeah, right. Like just spread them. But I don't know, maybe it's like tough for people to leave their job and be here for like in an entire week.
I think it's a good question. I think it's a question that both you and I should both ask.
No, seriously. I thought about it, like, because the atmosphere here is so pleasant. You connect with people, food, drinks, knowledge, toolkits, everything. And then, but like 4 days, I need more.
Exactly. And really like Tuesday night is kind of a short night. So it's almost like 3 days really.
Yeah, I think 3 days because but in the end, it's something cool. Yeah. This is maybe for the next week. No, next Placemaking
No, I think
Europe.
we need to talk about that because it should be Placemaking Week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not Placemaking Days.
But Placemaking Half Week.
So you're happy now?
I'm happy. No, I'm very happy. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's obviously with all the different things that I've, you and I have just been talking about, it's added up to a really nice experience.
So far, what is your favorite moment?
Well, I think let's see, it's hard to pick a favorite moment. I think a couple just of the kind of get-togethers with people have been really nice. Yeah. Seeing people I haven't seen, meeting new people. So I've had a couple of those nice moments. But also, I mentioned earlier that there was a session, I'm part of a working group within Placemaking Europe called Place-Led Development.
Yeah.
And we've been working pretty hard for the last 6 months or so.
Wow.
Organizing 5 different sessions. 5 different sessions.
Wow.
And, one of the, so one of them I was a moderator on today actually.
Yeah.
And we had, we were lucky enough to get great speakers. One flew in from France.
Good job.
One flew in from London, and then we had Hans, who's always a great speaker. You could probably put him in any session.
Yeah. He's the what do you call it, Joker on the cards.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there was a last minute change this morning of where the venue was, so we weren't sure if people would show up. We got a great turnout. We had a great discussion.
Amazing.
We had great questions. And so that felt like a really satisfying, experience.
Yeah. And tell me about this group. What is what are you working with?
Sure. So place-led development, the idea is, it could, maybe a more simple term for it would be, real estate and placemaking.
Okay.
That might be like a more simplified way of saying it. But the reason we call it place-led development is this idea that that in real estate and in larger projects, it could be done by the city, it can be done by others as well. It doesn't have to be, it could be done by business improvement districts.
Yeah.
But I guess our focus is a little more on the real estate community. That placemaking, often what tends to happen is placemaking, if it happens at all, it tends to happen at the end as more of a marketing thing or as kind of an afterthought, put it that way. Whether it's for marketing or whether it's because it's something that they decide at the end that it would be a cool thing to do. That maybe the sales are not going that well, whatever the reason is. They then bring someone in to help them kind of activate the spaces, do some cool things, but it's not really a central strategy. So the idea of place-led development is that you're leading with placemaking.
Yeah.
And I always kind of say that it's kind of like sustainability was maybe 15 years ago, where 15 years ago, people, and I think it's still an issue. But people weren't thinking about sustainability, and everyone was saying you can't think about it at the end. You have to think about it at the beginning.
Exactly.
And it has to be, that person, whoever is representing the sustainability element of the project, that person or people, they need to be at the table from day one. And so our idea is that the same is the case with placemaking, that there should be someone thinking about how is this development going to feel? How are you going to activate the space? How are you going to co-create with the community, engage the community, all these different things. And that person should have an equal footing in the development process, and should be there from day one.
Yeah.
So we're really, I think we're still feeling our way through this, but our general idea is that a lot of the placemaking tends to be a little bit bottom up. But for example, some of the projects that we had presented today, they're as big as 200 hectares.
Wow.
They're just massive developments, right? And so if you can make placemaking a central part of that strategy, 200 hectares, that's going to be a huge impact.
True.
So it's not to say that we don't need the bottom up placemaking. That's still super critical. And I think a lot of those bottom up placemakers can be part of the process of working with the developers. But we need to get into that community of real estate developers and investors so that they think about these things from day one.
Yeah, because it's actually my next question is like, who's responsible for making this happen?
Yeah.
That placemaking comes in the early of what do you call it, phases, and not in the end, just for marketing or just for fun.
Yeah. Well, I think there's different ways it can happen. I think one of the big things that's come out of this conference is we've put together a really good network of cities.
Okay.
So cities, I think, can be really demanding it of the developers. So when developers are going, proposing projects, creating master plans, getting approvals, if they want to require placemaking to be more central, the project that Hans presented in the Netherlands today. That was very much part of it. They wanted placemaking to be a central strategy, and they actually created a quality team that would oversee every development plan that happened as part of this project as it got built out, because there was multiple landowners. So it could be the cities, it could be the developers and the investors themselves who just kind of something clicks in their head and they say, oh, this is not just an extra cost or an extra thing that people are pushing us to do. It can be, there's actually some value to us. Some of it's, there's a financial value, and some of it's more intangible. But we know that if, when we put placemaking at the center of what we're doing, it's a more lively district, more people, cities are these days obviously in competition with each other, right? And even within cities, neighborhoods are in competition, right? And if you're kind of a city that's not doing anything very innovative or dynamic, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, they die.
They die, exactly. You might have been wonderful and you might have been cutting edge in the 80s or 90s or the 70s, but nobody goes there anymore. And people are looking. I think also as humans, we're always looking for new experiences, and we can't travel 365 days a year. So some of that has to come from experiencing new neighborhoods.
Yeah, like local. So now I will put the mask of a land developer or real estate developer, and I will ask you, what's in it for me when I put placemaking in the early stage instead of just having it in the end? Yeah.
Well, I would say more. One of the challenges for us is I think we need to produce more proof that there is financial value and also this kind of intangible value to placemaking.
Yeah.
So I think we still have some work to do to kind of, for those that aren't convinced yet, we still have some work to do to really show the value. But if I could say, if I could, suddenly have that information in front of me, I would say that there's a lot of benefits. You tend to your ground floors are going to be more active. You're probably going to have your choice of more interesting retailers. You can curate them. You can have a more interesting mix, which raises the financial value of whatever's above the ground floor, the office and the residential. You still might want to make some of that residential and workspace affordable, but for the parts that are market rate, you can raise the financial value of those spaces. So, and people are going to want to go there. For example, one of the projects today that we were talking about was King's Cross in London. And they did a really great job, really doing all these things, thinking about, they actually put the public space in first. They actually had to sell off some of the land that they owned to different developers to be able to finance it. But they saw the value in first creating kind of a destination, right? So we have the public space. They actually have a canal that runs through. So they really worked that public space to kind of create this destination. And then people were already coming for the public space. Then when they started to bring in the retail and then of course the office and everything else, people already knew it. People already wanted to be there. And then, they sold it quicker. They rented it out quicker. They had their choice of, more interesting uses. And so I think there's a lot of benefits to the developer.
Yeah. And like, what are, from a placemaker point of view, what are the challenges that place-led development is facing now?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest challenge that place-led development is facing is really just this, if you were to kind of talk to 100 developers, probably one of them would be interested, or maybe even less. At this point, they kind of say, yeah, but I can kind of do it. I can just keep doing it the old way.
Yeah, I make money.
True. I know how to do it.
It works.
And it works.
Yeah.
Exactly. and in a lot of cases, the people that build it are not the ones that hold on to it.
Of
right?
course.
So they build it, they sell it off to an investor.
Yeah.
And so, the people that are going to benefit from it are not the ones that are actually spending the money to build it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the big challenges. And so, I would go back to that point. It's, most developers and investors just don't think about these things at this point. They think of it as an extra cost, as, they did that in King's Cross, but King's Cross is different.
It's a special, yeah. We are not King's Cross.
Yeah, exactly. Not everyone is King's Cross. We're not going to be able to do that. So, but the truth is, probably a lot of areas could do it.
Yeah. What are the key elements that make place-led development project works?
I think, what are the key elements that make a place-led development work? Well, I think it's a real commitment. First of all, I mean, I think you have to come to it. Like I said, not coming in at the end with the placemaking.
So like the timing.
The timing, yeah. I think the timing is important. I think also the the commitment to it, and just understanding that it's not kind of like just kind of putting bells and whistles on a project, that it's really, it's about being authentic, authentically trying to engage the community, authentically trying to get interesting uses, not just trying to get Starbucks, but, you might want to have a Starbucks, but not just getting all those kind of retailers in there. You're trying to get, the more interesting, you're trying to scout out and really get a really interesting mix, and maybe even be creative about things. The first few years, maybe you even, to activate the space, maybe you're even giving it rent free, and then working up to maybe a reduced rent. Really supporting, much the same way you would activate, kind of empty storefronts.
Yeah.
Because you're starting from zero, so you have to kind of think about it in a similar way.
Yeah.
Kind of, how do we activate the space? And we might need to be a little flexible to get things going.
Exactly.
And in the long run, if there's a lot of stuff happening on the ground floor, you're going to sell high. You might make less on the ground floor, but you're going to make it upstairs.
Exactly. Then you balance the
exactly
income. David, can you share with us like a project that you work with related to this topic, and tell us about like the what happened, the journey of the project?
Let's see. I would say the best example, honestly, I personally haven't worked with a project, a place-led project. So I can't speak from experience, honestly.
Yeah.
I've worked with projects. I can now think back to my days when I worked on projects that were not place-led.
Okay.
Where we were really thinking about just the buildings and maybe putting some public spaces. So we were thinking about some of the right things, but not all the right things.
Yeah.
So I can think back to those days. But now looking back, I can see, we needed to be thinking more about, this kind of more granular stage. But I think, the projects that we've managed to attract, to come speak at these 5 different events that I talked about, King's Cross is a great example. King's Cross. So maybe I'll talk about King's Cross a little bit, and also this project. I'm not good at pronouncing in Dutch, but I think it's Mervida in Utrecht in the Netherlands, which is Hans's project, or Hans has been involved in the project. So the way that, let's see, starting with King's Cross, the way that project worked, first of all, they bought the land 2 weeks after the Lehman Brothers crash in 2008. So it was not a great time to, to be spending a lot of money and investing in an area. And so, like I said, they started with the public space, but even that, they didn't have, they had a certain amount of money, and it was not enough for the full build out of the public space.
Yeah.
So they thought about, okay, strategically, who do we want? Who do we know we want to be here? And who can we sell some parcels of land to that'll then be reinvested in the public space? So they did that. They got the public space going. They started getting people coming to King's Cross. Next, they started with really activating the ground floors, some temporary uses at first, but then moving on to, really curating in a very active way, which they continue to this day, even though they don't have full ownership, they actually have a management agreement, from all the different owners that are involved, although they're still the principal owner, to curate that. So they actually scout out and they actually find the interesting, retailers, restaurants, boutique stores, all this kind of stuff that make an interesting place.
Exactly.
And then they've just been strategic in, how they've designed, the public space and the connections across. It's about 25 hectares, 60 acres. So they've been very strategic about that.
Yeah, but like this model.
Yeah,
could be implemented in somewhere else. Oh no, this was specific for that area, and we can just maybe get inspiration from it. It's not applicable everywhere.
I don't know. It's a good question. Could it be applied everywhere? I mean, if, for example, I'll think back to the project that I mentioned before, which was also about the same size. It was about 60 acres. It was out. King's Cross is much more central than the project I was working on. It was in Queens, in New York City. And it was kind of a very, contaminated, there was a lot of infrastructure problems and contamination. And so the area needed to be redeveloped. I think very much this approach could have been applied there. Because, what happens is, especially when you're talking about these larger scale developments, things don't happen in 1 year or 2 years, right? Like you can build a building in 1 or 2 years,
Sure.
but you don't build 60 acres in 1 or 2 years.
Way.
I mean, in that case, you're talking about, say, if you're talking in square meters, you're talking about 800,000 square meters, that or a million square meters.
Yeah.
This takes a long time. And the financing of it obviously isn't going to all come in, to get things done at the same time. So thinking about, okay, first of all, maybe how do we activate the space with the public space? How do we create temporary uses that hopefully we can incorporate into the permanent uses. Once there's actual buildings on the site. So if I think back to that project, I think actually it would have been the perfect approach to it. And if I think back to like a smaller project, for example, if I think back to another project in New York City where it was more of kind of a one block project, so getting more, to maybe a more typical project that, you would see, there's only so many King's Crosses in the world. I think there could have been some opportunity there. In that case, it was a reuse of a courthouse, a former municipal courthouse. They had built a new courthouse, somewhere else in the neighborhood, and they had this nice historic building that was being redeveloped with residential, some affordable community space, some retail. And I think actually, in a way, there probably could have been a similar way to approach it. To think about, okay, first we want this to become a destination. It's always been, in a way, a courthouse probably has a lot of negative connotation. You go there because you're being sued for something. It's not the best. You don't associate the best memories often with going to court. So in that case, I could have imagined, for example, obviously there would have had to been some work done to, make sure the structure was safe overall. Yeah. But perhaps really activating the ground floor first, and maybe bringing in some temporary uses, just to, pop-ups or meanwhile spaces or kind of spaces that maybe were on short-term contracts, just to really activate the space. I think there was a small piece of public space that, relatively small, just in front of the building. So that could have also been activated, and events or programming could have been part of it. So if that project, and that was very much done in a traditional way, it was going to be residential, it was going to be retail, and because they were forced by us, the city, I was working, in a city agency, they were forced to do some community space. But they really wanted to approach it in a very traditional way. But if we said, no, we want to make sure that this becomes a destination beforehand, and that, some of these temporary uses become part of the retail space that you build. I think that could have been a really excellent way to just change the whole feeling towards the building, so that it became a positive experience.
So like cities are a kind of the key player here. Right? Like we talk about like real estate developers, placemakers, and cities.
Yep.
So cities can be also the key player here.
It's true.
They kind of like force the real estate developers to work with this kind of processes.
No, I think you make a good point. Yep. That's actually the interesting thing, and I have to say, having
like
worked,
if you cannot convince the real estate developer, then you have cities.
Exactly. Before I came to Barcelona, so my first career, like I was talking about at the beginning, I always worked for city government, and what we call in the States, state government, but always, some form of government. And I have to say, it, sometimes government gets a bad reputation, bureaucrats and all this kind of stuff. But for me, it was the most satisfying.
Really?
Because you're really in the middle of everything, and
I mean, like you have the power also?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it, I think, but also because you have this power to say, okay, you're going to develop this courthouse, but I mean, you have to kind of run the financial numbers to make sure you're not asking for too much, and you're going to turn off the developers and they're going to walk away. Yeah. So there's always some limitations to what you can ask for, but you can say that. You can say, listen, this is how we want you to do things, because we know this is better for the community.
Exactly.
And so you can really see the benefits of you can see the benefits of your work in a pretty immediate way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think, as opposed to say a consultant, sometimes you do a study, but the city doesn't do anything with it. Right. If you're working for the city, and I think developers also probably have this experience when they get to build things out, but cities are really in the middle of things. So to get back to your question, now that we're having this conversation, I think you've made a really good point. I think we should be place-led developments should somehow fit in the word cities because they're really central.
I think so.
There's some developers like the Argent, which is the company that did King's Cross, which still had to get approvals from the city, and so I'm sure there was some pushing from the city.
Yeah.
But I think generally as an organization they get it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I said 1 in 100 get it, that might have been generous.
I understand. Yeah.
So to answer your question, cities are really critical in making sure that if you're not going to get it, we're gonna make sure you do it.
Exactly.
Because we get it.
Exactly. We run the city.
Yeah, exactly. We get it, and we want our city to be a nice city. And so, if you want to play with us,
welcome.
Yeah, you have to play by these rules.
Exactly. So, what are the now I'm asking, we usually ask about goals, what we should do more, and so on.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, what should we stop doing as placemakers?
Yeah, I saw your questions beforehand, and I thought, oh, that's an interesting question. I think when I was thinking about that question, I think we do a lot of good things, so it's kind of hard.
Of course.
It's kind of like when you get when you're on an interview and they ask you, what are your weaknesses? And it's like, why am I going to tell you my weaknesses? Like I'm trying to get a job, but sincerely, I think I think placemakers do just a lot of things really well, and and I think placemakers are idealists, and they really just want to make cities better, and so it's hard to kind of point out anything that they do badly. But if I was to pick one thing, it's maybe a constructive criticism, which is maybe to not undervalue ourselves. For example, I think right now, a lot of placemakers, or at least the people that put that label on themselves.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's a lot of people doing placemaking that call themselves something else. But if the people that put the name on themselves, I think they don't maybe see a role, for example, of working with a real estate developer and saying, "Hey guys, we have to make this project. We have to start with the public space, or we have to get more interesting retailers, or we have to make affordable workspace as part of this project, or affordable housing, or whatever it is." And I think from what I've seen, sometimes placemakers live a little separate from the private sector in a sense. And so maybe placemakers could see themselves as, listen, we offer a lot of value.
That's true.
We offer a lot of value. We've been doing this in a different part of the economy, or whatever you want to call it. But we could just as easily do the same stuff for private developers and investors. Yeah. And so I think we should stand strong and feel good about ourselves, and know that I think it's moving in our direction. There's more and more people getting interested, and so we should be knocking on the doors of the people that maybe in the past we haven't knocked
exactly. On. I think this is journey we are doing as a placemakers. Before, we started as a movement, nobody know about this.
Yep.
And then we are not really sure if should we have it as a title, or what is our main responsibility.
Exactly.
But I think now it's time, to really not underestimating ourselves as a placemakers, and take the lead. No.
Yeah.
It's we have an architect, we have an urban planner. We could also be a placemaker and doing this stuff.
Yep.
Right. And see the value of being a placemaker, and not hide and, hey, I'm placemaker. This is
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in yourself, who will believe in you?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's almost kind of it almost feels like, in some ways, sometimes you think of a placemaker as an unofficial title. That people do. But what are you really? You're a placemaker, so you're an architect, or what are you?
Exactly.
And we should say, no, that this is a real profession.
Exactly. I think now, I talked with this with Ethan Kent shortly, that there is not a specific, let's say, a university program for a placemaker. Yep. So that's why, everyone, I'm an architect and a placemaker. I'm exactly. I don't know, urban planner and placemaker.
Right.
But I think we are heading toward like there will be an academic education, a program. So when you're done, you get a diploma. You're a placemaker as a, like a title.
Exactly.
I think this is the next phase of our journey.
It's interesting you mentioned that. The funny thing is, so I mentioned to you that I had done some work with Pontevedra in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're kind of like, kings of placemaking in a lot of senses. Of course, there's always more things you could do.
Yeah.
But I think they've done a lot of things really well. They've just hosted a conference of 400 something placemakers who are love the city, who are going on site visits tomorrow and going to give feedback on some of the pressing questions that are still facing Pontevedra. And personally, going back to the project that I worked on with them, I've always personally felt like, in Spain, the title of even urban planner doesn't exist. That's an architect. So it's an architect who doesn't really study urban planning exactly. Some courses that are urban planning related, but they're really more. Their instinct is still to like take out a piece of paper and draw, right? And they don't think holistically the way even an urban planner thinks,
Yeah.
And so my thought was even Pontevedra should be like the first Spanish city to have as part of the university that's already here.
Yeah, like put this.
And just be, whether it's placemaking, whether it's an urban planning program with placemaking as a real central focus.
Like a profile.
Or just call it placemaking. Yeah.
But this is like super bold statement, no?
Yeah.
Like I think for the next city that to put the flag on like how to say, cities for people, or let's see if there's another city like gonna do this.
Yeah.
Because this is making history.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is big, no?
It is big, but it's like, for example, I mean, the mayor, he gave a great speech a couple nights ago, and he won't be mayor forever. Hopefully, he's around for a while longer, but at some point he won't be mayor. And I think we'll see what direction the city takes once he's gone. But I think there's a risk of all this knowledge being lost. And if they work on kind of turning it into something, urban planning, maybe it's part of an architecture school, whatever they want to do, but really kind of like
put it down,
start using all the knowledge that they've accumulated through the people working for the city, the consultants that have helped them, and really turning this into a course, flying some of us in, and just, doing something. It could be an executive education program. It doesn't have to be a full degree.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. So we are in the end of this episode, and I have three questions for you.
Okay.
Yeah. The first one is going to be about you giving a message to Pontevedra.
Okay.
And it's more related to city development.
Okay. So what advice would I give to the city of Pontevedra for city development?
Yeah.
My advice to them is, I think that you as a city have done an amazing job, as I've said a few times now. And I think the question now is, what's the next step for the city? I mean, I think, you have to continue doing what you're doing. And I think that has to continue because there's still parts of the city when you get a little bit farther away from the city, the center of the city, that still need the same treatment that a pretty big part of the city has already received, but not all of the city. So I think that has to continue. But in parallel, it's starting to think about what's the next phase. And I think for me, the next phase is thinking about how do you leverage all this great work that you've done?
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it's thinking about, you have a great quality of life, you have great food, you have great public space, you have a beautiful city, it's a manageable city, you feel good. I mean, I was just on one of the sessions today where they were talking about how to measure the health impacts measure health impacts of interventions in the city.
Yeah.
And they had some kind of meter, and it was coming up a 97% score on health. Which I think in most cities, it's probably something like 50%, I know in Barcelona, at least on the weather app, it's like always like below 50%,
Oh, this is crazy.
97%, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's no cars, right? So, So for me, it's the question to Pontevedra is like, how do you leverage this? How do you take this great city, all this great work that you've done, and leverage it to do something else that'll make the city even better? maybe it's, getting the word out there for companies and remote workers that they should move here. It's a nice city with all these great things. If you don't have to be in a big city like Madrid or London or whatever, maybe you can be here. Or if you're, a remote worker, maybe you can live here and commute.
Why not? Exactly.
In another way, maybe it's thinking about how to foster, some kind of, innovation districts are becoming a big topic around the world. So maybe it's thinking about leveraging the parts of the economy that they have and this great public space, and maybe thinking about how to foster some kind of innovation district that builds, they have some building blocks and builds off that.
Do you think they need to kind of rebrand the city somehow or no?
I don't think they need to rebrand it. I think they did an excellent job bringing us here. Yeah. Because I think what they need is recognition.
Okay.
I think they need to be put on the map.
Yeah.
I think they've gotten a lot of awards. They showed, I think the mayor showed awards.
Yeah, from Abu Dhabi.
Exactly. So they got a lot of awards, but even in Barcelona, I never heard that they got that award.
Yeah.
I'm not that far away.
Yeah.
So I think they need more international recognition by having people come to the city.
Exactly.
Or there could probably be other ways for that to happen.
Yeah.
But a big thing is having conferences here, having people come here.
True.
And then using those opportunities to kind of pitch. Thinking about what they want phase 2 to be, but using the opportunities to pitch phase 2.
It's a very interesting challenge.
Yeah,
seriously, it's super interesting to work with this challenge.
Yeah. I think it's obviously. I mean, there's no magic solution to that.
Of course, no.
But I think for me that kind of feels like what the next step is.
Yeah, interesting. So now, if you don't mind, I will make a video of you when I will ask the next question.
Okay.
Are you fine with that?
Sure.
Yeah. Give our listeners 3 takeaway messages.
3 takeaway messages from the conference.
Yeah. Or from you in general, you decide.
Let's see. One is that I would say demand better cities from your city governments, from the real estate developers, from everyone that is involved in the city making process. So, whether that's, measuring the health impacts and using those to go demand improvements, or whether that's, becoming aware of the next King's Cross who's not doing it the same way and they're going to do it in the old way. Just demanding, demanding it and ideally coming with some information or some ideas of how it can be done better. So I would say that's one big takeaway. I would say that cities are made for people. And that's a big lesson of Pontevedra. That, you walk around here and probably you've passed 5 or 10 cars the whole week.
True.
Right. And they kind of show that it can be done. It can be done. In Barcelona, they're trying to do the super blocks. They're not quite, they've done a few, but they haven't done so many yet. But I think they're headed in that same direction. And I think more and more cities need to be thinking about that, thinking about getting cars off the streets and remembering that cities are made for people. And then I guess just to kind of tie it back to what I was talking about with place-led development is, getting cities, since I think you made a very good point that cities are really an important part of place-led development. Getting cities to demand, which is connected to my first point, I guess, but getting cities to demand more of their developers.
Yeah.
If you're going to get an approval from us, we want more placemaking.
Yeah. And the last question is going to be you asking it to us. So no more question from my side. Now It's your turn to ask a question. What is your question to me and to our listeners?
Okay. My question to you and all the listeners. I would say my question would be, how do we... I think it's getting to a point that you mentioned earlier, is we're evolving as a movement, right? Placemaking started small, and now we're starting to create this network of cities, and now we're starting to create a little further behind, but starting to create a little bit of a network of developers. So to all the people that are interested in placemaking, and just creating better cities in general. What's the next stage of development, and how do we make that happen? How do we all come together next year, wherever we are, and really kind of have a plan of, I think this year there was a lot of effort put in to really bring 50 cities together. 4 of them sponsored the conference. What's the big mission next year? So I think that would be my question.
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Well, David, I'm really happy to talk to you. I really enjoyed, and hopefully we're gonna continue our conversation with more interesting stories. And we keep in touch and keep up the good work. Good job.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience.